let's hand it over to all of you. I think we're just going to get you to stand up in place, say your name.
So the question, I think broadly is, how do we get government to do the fairly simple, sensible things around gas connections for homes? And I think there's good news. So Victoria is leading the pack here. Lily D'Ambrosio is really a sort of firecracker. She's the Energy Minister for Labor, and she works closely with an advocate called Bruce Mountain, and their work and others and a whole bunch of citizens groups have enabled her to make a gas transition plan, which is to wind down completely. They now no new gas in new build homes, which is something that's a sensible policy. And then they even made a nice policy. So the Australian Energy Regulator, I don't think you're under its purview in Western Australia because you are Texas, but they charged me $1,256 to disconnect from gas after I didn't need gas anymore. So you bought a house that is 80 years old, you've done all the right things, and then they're going to charge you $1,200 on the way out. I got a friend who just did the guerrilla approach. She took a hacksaw, cut it off, plugged the pipe herself, returned the meter to the meter company, got the receipt, and then waited until the company came and fixed her dodgy work. And she didn't get charged. So there is an opportunity. Make sure that you do it safely, of course, but there is an opportunity for, what do they call it, passive resistance? No, peaceful resistance. Yeah. But they have also, in Victoria, they make you pay, if you're putting gas in, you have to pay the abolition fee, which is the disconnection fee, up front, which means it's not economic to put any pipelines in anywhere anymore. So I think we've got to get those fees repealed. I think we've just got to make economic arguments. The problem is gas will tell you that gas is cheaper, but it's cheaper against the worst electric technology, not the best, not even the average. They cherry pick the absolute worst case, and then they'll make some argument about jobs lost and economics, which is fallacy. It was work by groups like Rewiring Australia and citizens groups who said, no, actually, these are the real numbers that gave Lilly the license. So I think maybe the answer to your question is you kind of just, unfortunately, there's just you've got to do everyone's homework, and there's just hard work to be done, and you've got to go to all the local councils and convince them that it's a bad idea to do these new builds and these partnerships. You've got to go to the state government, just say it over and over and over, and don't pat yourself on the back if you go to the government office once, right? The gas industry literally is there every day. There's like 80 gas lobbyists permanently positioned in Canberra, right? So when I remember going with all of these solar and battery and electrification people, and they were having this self-congratulatory, we've got 40 of us in Canberra for a lobbying day. And they asked me to give the motivational speech. And I'm like, guys, they've got twice as many people here every day. So you've got to go in there every day, and you've got to tell the economic story. This is the better story for us. This is better for our children. You've got to use pets die earlier. We did this study in America, unfortunately. People don't really care that their children get respiratory illnesses from burning gas inside their homes, but they really care about the pet. And the pets, it's particularly bad because the particulate matter, the NOxes and SOxes sit at ground level when you cook with a gas stove, and so that, the poor dogs, puppies die. So take pictures of puppies and kittens and lobby. I'm serious. I mean, I am a rational scientist, but I've now been in this game long enough to understand this is just a human storytelling project. You've got to tell them about the economics. People aren't going to suffer. It's going to work out. And it's going to kill puppies and kittens if you keep burning gas.
I'm just going to repeat that question, which was, can you explain the fallacy that the gas companies put out that the renewables are going to destabilise the grid?
It's like you're a plant from my favourite question. This might get really technical really fast, but I'll try to keep it simple. So if you've ever got a really old light bulb, occasionally you can hear a hum that's sort of zzz. That's the 50 hertz. It's a sine wave of the AC, alternating current of the grid. So the gas company and others, when they wish to say the grid won't cope, one of the things they mean is that historically, that 50 hertz comes from what they call spinning inertia, which literally means the generator that's attached to the coal plant or the gas plant spins like a giant flywheel, and it spins at a constant speed, and that speed determines that 50 hertz signal. So when they say there won't be enough inertia, they're worried that if all of the solar is on, you won't have that AC signal coming from their gas or their coal, and they're going to make the argument that 2 million Western Australian rooftops with all their little inverters buzzing with a different sine wave, they're all going to mash together and make a mess, and you won't get good, clean AC power. But the proof that this is a fallacious argument is in your pocket. Every single one of you is carrying a phone that is coordinated by a GPS clock that works with 20 billionths of a second accuracy. More than enough, the clock that accurate is more than enough to create sine waves that form that 50 hertz. So many of you have an inverter on your house. Old-fashioned inverters 20 years ago just made a sine wave at any, pretty much any frequency at any time. But now we have things called grid following inverters, which they can see the grid is going like this, so then they make electricity that looks like this. There's now grid forming inverters, which means that even if without any grid signal, they can make the right sine wave, and they can even switch between these modes. Now, it will take about 10 or 15 years for all of those inverters to take over, but what that means is you don't need that signal from the gas grid. The proof of this was in a very nerdy report that came out. I can give you a reference if you want, in Adelaide last week, where South Australia Power Networks decommissioned one of the remaining 2 gas plants. They're like, we don't need one of these anymore for this signal. And so they jettisoned that. And I'm a nerd, so I talked to the network engineers who are building the system. They're like, yeah, we probably don't need the other one either, but we haven't proven that to the government's satisfaction yet. So, turns out computers, electronics for the win, and we don't need these old machines.
Talking about, momentum, and the question was, at what stage is Wollongong and the 2515 project at in terms of demonstrating proof of concept, I guess, to government?
We're doing okay, but we're not so far ahead that Melville can't win the race. And I'm very serious about that, and I believe this really is a race. And again, thank you for your early work, right? We all thought this was going to happen 40 years ago, then 30 years ago, then 20 years ago, then 10 years ago, and we're still here. How do we make it different this time? So we now have all the technologies genuinely at cost, at scale, right? We're 25% of new vehicle purchases are electric. 4 million Australian houses have solar. We'll have 1 million houses with batteries in a few years. Like, everything now exists, everything is cheaper than gas. So that's a big advantage. But we have, like the last question, people trying to say it won't work. The thing we were really trying to prove in Wollongong was a pretty nerdy technical thing. All of the world's electricity grids evolved at roughly the same time. We all electrified roughly between 1900 and 1940. And this is globally, so all the world's electricity grids look roughly the same. We have a substation. It's an ugly machine, probably near some railway tracks. You guys don't have railway tracks. Somewhere behind a sports oval. That substation typically has something called 5 strings or feeders. They're 5 lines that serve about 1,000 households. And that's the general topology. In 2515, we have 1 substation and we have 5, yet again, we're extremely average, and we have 5 strings with about 1,000 households on each string. And we wanted to get about a quarter of the community all electric, including their vehicles, so that we could show that for 1 string, this fundamental component of the grid, it all works. And no one can say it doesn't work anymore, and we could show up and we can say, and here's the economics, and we're now spending a whole bunch more on the surf club because we're saving $12 million a year as a community. When we proposed to the Australian Renewable Energy Agency to do the project, we're like, electric cars are still a little bit expensive. It's the thing that's really going to make or break the grid. We need you to help us subsidise the electric cars so we can get about 400 of them in the community, and that would be enough to stress the grid, make sure we figure out how to do enough charging infrastructure, because half the cars sleep on the street, not inside a comfy garage with an electric blanket. So, but the Australian Renewable Agency says, oh no, we do not believe in subsidies, especially for cars. We believe in choice. Choice is, whenever Australia doesn't want to do something, we say we believe in personal choice. And we don't believe in subsidies. We don't believe in middle class welfare. These are the three ways they say no to you. So cars were not in our pilot project. We are adopting cars faster than other communities, partly because everyone's like, oh, they're getting it, and we've got good communicators locally telling the story, but not sufficiently to really show that it really, really works. One of the reasons, yes, we're getting really close, and we can do that work with modelling, and we can sort of figure it out. But one of the reasons I would say Melville or somewhere in Western Australia can win first is because you didn't privatise your grid in the 1980s like we did, which was a huge mistake. Then you sell it to a coalition of the Macquarie Bank and the Malaysian Super Fund or something. And so they're holding us back on the neighbour-to-neighbour energy interactions. But if I was choosing the two places in the world that can probably beat us in Wollongong, and I am trying to set up a state of origin here, it's Western Australia and South Australia.
Nothing Western Australia likes better than being out in front. So I suggest that's a really excellent idea about making it a competition.
Yeah, so I think it should be a competition. I think, there's a mayor here today. So find all the mayors in Western Australia and who would like their community to get over the finish line first, sell them on the story of the economics. You are the most cash flush state in the nation as far as I can tell. So the state government should be able to come in here and support this on the idea of, this is good for household economics, and just get that first instance up and running, and you'll have a much easier pathway than the rest of Australia in terms of doing the local electricity trading. I think I met a guy here yesterday who's working on the technology to do that, who's from here. So we're doing well, thank you. We're not going nearly fast enough. In a climate sense, we're 10 years behind schedule, but you can catch up, beat us, and then show the world.
I know the Mayor will take that on board. Will we following up? Sorry, and I forgot to acknowledge you earlier, and thank you very much for coming today. John, so the question was, could you please comment on the WA government justifying its gas exports, particularly to Asia, because it's part of the transition?
Two things, topple a government, rolling blackouts, and losing a lot of industrial jobs. And the political currency I learned very quickly doing lobbying work in Washington, DC and in Canberra is, they're like, that's very cool, you told us about the money, can you tell us about the jobs? So your job is always to translate into jobs. So there's fear of loss, there's the fear that the grid won't work and you'll have blackouts and then the government will get thrown out, and there's the fear that jobs will be lost, which is this industrial story. Unfortunately, I can't remember whether it was the Sydney Morning Herald or New York Times yesterday carried an article about Japan, the head of Toyota in Japan saying, we can't, we have to have Australian gas. And so Asian nations are definitely selling this story that we have to have natural gas. I also started a thing called Rewiring Taiwan. So I've been doing on the ground activism in Taiwan, which got me invited to, with all the Taiwanese government, an event hosted by, among others, DFAT, so Australian Trade, and it was a natural gas industry sales event. And Australia's big enough and America's big enough, we have reasonable energy modelling at government level, not that we follow it, to sort of tell us that you don't need gas for the transition. But they don't have that in Taiwan or Indonesia or most of the countries of the world. And the gas industry, surprise, surprise, is there at these events saying, oh, you'll lose all of your jobs and you'll lose your industry if you don't have gas for this transition. So it is a story being sold internationally, and you're hearing it, just the echo chamber is reflecting it back here. And I think it's seeing that up close and personal. But I went to Madeleine King in Canberra and I had a very nice conversation with her and I said, has anyone shown you any pathways where you don't need gas for the transition? And she said, no, can you model that for me? I can't get anyone to model it. So literally, we don't even have the team selling the positive case to the politicians. I'm like, great, you've asked, that's more homework for Saul. And do you have any money to pay me to do that? No. Can you do that for free, please? So that's the problem. We have an industry that is controlling the models that the government gets that tell you that you're going to lose all these jobs, I'm literally going to New York to Climate Week next week to try and raise international philanthropy to build a skeleton ninja team to do this modelling so that at least civil society groups can say, no, you're wrong, we have this modelling here, it's all very open and transparent, not like the gas industry's models, and you'll be fine. So this is going to happen repeatedly until we can fight fire with better fire, sadly, because otherwise the government's scared of job loss and blackouts.
How do we displace fossil fuels with renewable energy when renewable energy has actually given us almost a license to use more and more as we go from year to year?
There's a really good book called More and More and More, which is very frustrating and very French, that makes this argument. And it says we've never transitioned off any fuel. So the idea of an energy transition is wrong. We just have more and more and more. It's actually not true. We did transition off whale oil. And we are, in fact, transitioning off coal, and that will happen pretty soon. So I liked the book because it was like your comment. It's like realistically, it's a little more cultural than just a technology substitution. The efficiency argument, however, has been used by the gas industry to slow down. It's like, just be more efficient, people. That's how we'll solve climate change, and it's really not true, right? For the Australian household, if you do all the traditional efficiency things, insulate the hell out of your house, put in the double glazed windows, like insulation for your house is a $5,000 to $25,000 household project. Double glazed windows all around is a $100,000 plus project. They just aren't economic. They will make, the average Australian household uses a little over 100 kilowatt hours per day. If you do all of that insulation, it's going to make about a 3 kilowatt hour per day difference. That's because most of your energy is used in your cars, not in your house. If you electrify that 100 kilowatt hour per day house completely, you only need about 40 kilowatt hours per day. So electrification is in fact the solution. But your comment reminded me of the gentleman who said, look, I was building solar houses in the 70s. The problem, and I understand, I'm up here, I'm a bicycle advocate, but I'm telling you to buy electric cars, and I'm uncomfortable about that because even if it's a line of electric Ford Rangers, it's going to piss me off nearly as much. And guaranteed, the reality is now, with the solar that you get in Perth, you could build even bigger homes and be zero emission. Is that really a great idea? You can, no, but I don't think that, this room is ready to hear a mixed message of, hey, a little bit of efficiency, some public transit, and some saving the whales and electrification, and we're going to have a pretty nice planet. But I think I'm still at the stage where I have to try and convert some people who watch Friday Night Football and they want an electric 4x4 that can drive over the same sand dunes. And they want the house in the suburbs. And I think we're still in the stage of the project where it's going to be, don't shock people too much. You can have, because technically, I can lower by 60%, I can lower your emissions by 100%, your energy use by 60%, same size car, same size house, it's just electric. But the problem is we probably will make them bigger, right? And I think other cultural forces will have to come into play. I've got to try and make my job, unfortunately, is make the message simple and palatable to a lot of people. And really the efficiency narrative, my co-founder of Rewiring America started a company called O-Power that delivered efficiency data on your electricity bill, and he sold it to Oracle, and it was very successful. But after 12 years of trying to sell efficiency measures to households and suggestions, what they found out is if it was a Democratic household and they got these messages, they would lower their energy use by 2%, and if it was a Republican household and they got these measures, they would raise their energy by 2%, because they're like, wait, I'm not using as much energy as my neighbor, let me turn some lights on.
It's my choice.
So I think your project is a long project. all is not lost. I think a lot of European cities are like, oh, now we've got the bicycle paths in, the city is better, the water is cleaning up. So I have hope, but I think it's a longer term play, and at the moment I am merely satisfied if I just get you to think electrification.
So the question is it realistic for local councils to provide batteries so that it's more equitable?
This is my other favourite question, so I got my two favourite questions today. Right. This is actually, where should the batteries be question. And I have to support the government's household battery plan. Is it the cheapest way to deploy batteries? Absolutely not. They're $1,000 a kilowatt hour on the side of your house. After the government discount, they're $700 a kilowatt hour. The reason that price is so high is because they have to satisfy building codes and fire codes, and it's a lot. And they're bespoke projects on every house because every house is different. We are getting bids for batteries at $150 a kilowatt hour that could do the same thing and could do it on the local distribution grid. And then you can get those same prices if you build a giant battery way out in where the wind farm is or where the solar plant is. If it's out near the wind farm and the solar farm, it's mostly doing work to balance out just that one solar farm. If it's behind your meter on the side of your house, it's really just working for you and not necessarily working for the grid. If you really think about the energy system, there are a bunch of bottlenecks. There's a bottleneck at your wall. There's a bottleneck at the lumpy pole on the street, which is the pole with a transformer that's serving about 30 to 100 households. And then the next bottleneck is at the local substation, and then the next bottlenecks up from there are at the solar plant. You really would like the batteries to go at each of these bottlenecks. If we're trying to build the lowest cost energy system for Australia, you put it at each of these bottlenecks, and it means we don't need to add more wires because the battery can be a substitute for the wires. Or as a friend of mine says, maybe it's too nerdy, it's like wires move electricity in space and batteries move electricity in time. Maybe it doesn't make sense. Doesn't matter. Anyway, if I was betting on the most logical place to put the majority of the batteries, I would do exactly what you said, and I would put them in the community. But community battery means very different things to very different people. In New South Wales, there's a fight on for the electricity company to own the monopoly on the community battery. And they're making arguments like, but we'll be able to share it with low-income households, et cetera, et cetera. So everyone's using the same arguments to try and get their own rent-seeking monopoly, is what's happening. This is why I have faith. You have a pretty efficient, government-owned electricity distribution system. They would be a logical place to own the batteries and prove this out. No one can own a community battery in the rest of the country because it's illegal for the generators to own the battery right now, it's illegal for the retailer, and it's illegal for the distribution company. And then the communities find it illegal because no one will give them a space to put the battery. So it's a homeless idea, even if it is technically the best place to deploy the most batteries. And so the fight is on to get them back on the ground. There's a few pilot projects here and there. You should absolutely do them. If we put enough of those batteries on the local grid, they will lower the price of electricity for people. They'll help you deliver that 2.5 times more electricity without upgrading all the wires. There's a lot of reason to do it. So that's a long answer, but it's a technical question. It's actually really important, and we're not getting it right yet.
I think it was a great note to end on. And Saul, just before we go on, I just want to thank you today, because today has been so important to hear from you, and I'm really glad you've given us, like a really great overview, but then you've also honed in on the local, and I think you've done a magnificent job. Thank you.
Well, also thank you to everyone for showing up, and I can tell that there are people here who are trying to make this go faster, the transition, and thank you for that, and we do need to build this political force, so thanks for playing your part.